All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we are jumping into something pretty mind-bending, a mathematical model for the phrase be and it is. Yep, we're talking about building a bridge between quantum physics and the spiritual concept of creation itself.
So, let's just dive right in. The big question, the one that's been on people's minds forever, is this. How does a command, just an idea, actually become something real, something physical? Well, believe it or not, this model tries to give us a mathematical answer for that.
Okay, so the whole framework really kicks off by splitting reality into two sides. On one hand, you have the unseen world. Think of this as the quantum realm. It's all waves, pure potential, just possibilities. Then, on the other hand, you've got the seen world. That's our world, right? Solid particles, concrete reality. And the whole point of this model is to build a mathematical bridge between these two.
To build that bridge, we're going to need a special kind of equation. And this equation is made up of three, let's call them quantum ingredients. These are the three mathematical pieces that, when you put them together, are supposed to model that exact moment of creation.
So ingredient number one, the potential state. This is basically the raw material for, well, everything. In the language of quantum mechanics, it's that symbol you see, psi. But honestly, just think of it as a pure, unformed wave of all the things that could possibly exist.
Okay, next up, we have something called the truth filter. Now, mathematically, it's a projector, but a much cooler way to think about it is like a cosmic sieve. You pour all that raw potential through it, and it only lets the possibilities that line up with some kind of absolute, universal truth get through. Everything else gets filtered out.
And for our final ingredient, we have the belief aligner. Now, this is where things get really interesting. This operator brings in a subjective element, things like sincerity or belief. It's basically a dial, a weighting factor. It can amplify a potential or turn it down, depending on how strongly it aligns with that truth we just talked about.
So we've got our three ingredients: potential, truth, and belief. The big question now is, how do they all come together at that critical moment of creation? Let's take a look at the equation they form.
And here it is. They combine into this really elegant formula. The source material calls it the formation probability. And what it does is simple but profound. It calculates the exact probability that some potential thing will actually snap into real physical existence.
This equation really tells a story. Look at it. You start with the raw potential, the psi. It gets passed through the truth filter, PT. And then it gets weighted or amplified by belief, the B operator. What comes out the other side is the probability of it becoming real. It's a perfect little narrative of potential being aligned with truth and then magnified by belief. And what's so cool is that the math is just clean. The answer you get from this calculation is always a number between 0 and 1. 0 means it's impossible, 1 means it's a sure thing. So you end up with a perfectly defined probability for something to just be.
Okay, so now that we have our probability, the model gets to the really dramatic part. It describes the single, decisive moment, a tipping point, where that potential either becomes real or it just disappears. This is it. This is the be turning into it is.
So, how does it actually happen? Well, the whole mechanism comes down to two things: a specific command that kicks everything off and a threshold that it has to pass to succeed. And the process is surprisingly straightforward, really just 4 steps. First, the call. The be command is issued. Second, the calculation. Our formation probability gets computed instantly. Third, the threshold. That probability is checked against a set value. And finally, the outcome. If it hits or beats the threshold, boom, Fayakun, it is. The wave collapses, and we have a particle. If it doesn't, it just fizzles out.
The model actually formalizes this whole decision with something it calls the Fayakun indicator. And you can think of it as the ultimate on-off switch for reality itself. It only flips to on if those conditions, that alignment with truth weighted by belief, are strong enough to pass the test.
Okay, so this is where it all connects. This is the really crucial part. The model doesn't just stop at the quantum level. It builds that bridge we talked about, right from that instant of creation, straight into the physics of our everyday world.
The second that Fayakun indicator flips to on, the model says that all that potential energy that was in the wave state, it collapses. It becomes a real object with real mass and energy. Yeah, following E equals mc squared. And from that moment on, this brand new thing starts playing by the rules of classical physics. You know, F equals ma, the whole deal.
All right, let's zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture here, because the implications are pretty profound. This probability calculation, it turns out, does more than just decide if something exists or not. It actually sets it on one of two ultimate cosmic paths.
So according to the source material, the probability that something forms corresponds to coherent, structured energy. But what about the rest of the probability? You know, the part that didn't make the cut? Well, that becomes scattered, unbound energy. And the model even suggests this could be analogous to what we call dark energy.
And then the model takes it a step further. It actually maps these physical outcomes to spiritual archetypes. So, if your probability is close to 1, meaning you have almost perfect alignment with truth, the outcome is a coherent return to the source. If your probability is close to 0, you get unbound scattering. And everything in between, well, that's just our normal formed reality.
So when you boil it all down, the whole model is really a practical algorithm. It's a step-by-step process that gives you a clean line from quantum potential all the way to classical physics, using these incredible variables: truth and belief.
Really, the main thing to take away from all this is that the framework gives us a complete, testable, mathematical link. It starts with an abstract command, filters it through belief, and ends up with the hard physics of the world we can actually see and touch. It's the whole chain.
Now, it's really important to understand the perspective of the source material here. The point isn't to use science to prove scripture. It's framed the other way around, as an attempt to uncover a universal blueprint that might already be described within the scripture.
And that leaves us with a pretty provocative question to chew on, doesn't it? If there's even a shred of parallel between this model and our reality, if belief really does act like a force, a mathematical operator, then what kind of reality are you creating with your own alignment to truth?